Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to another episode of The Story of J.D. Davis. Jay, what's going on, my brother?
How you doing, Manny? Another week on the grind. Tough week, to be transparent, but any week with you, Michael, is a good week.
Exactly. The grind don't stop and the videos don't stop. Make sure you guys hit subscribe. If you're watching this, subscribe right now to Bowie Films. We love making content for you guys, but we can't do it without your support. Speaking of support, joining me here right now is the only man alive dodging child support from 3 different states. My friend, the ugly Michael Bowie.
Well, thank you, Manny, for having me here. It's funny that you brought that up, because originally, if we're talking about history, I was going to do this show alone, but I realized that I should bring you on because I didn't want to have a shortage of people on the show. So here you are. Thanks for being here. Let's have a moment where we jump right into the small talk. JD, welcome. Thank you for being here. We are in episode 3, and for anybody that watches the show, we all know that episode 4 is that climax. And so this episode is kind of that episode before that point where we really delve into the deepness of your story. And I know that it is a rough week, so thank you for being here and joining us with things that are going on inside of your life. The topic that I think is important in this episode, before we jump into the real stuff and the climax, I think I want to talk about religion. We kind of left off on that. And I think that for somebody who's mother and father come from a background of religion, from somebody that grew up inside of a religious household and inside of the church, religion, I think, is a big topic in your entire story. So I kind of want to learn how it evolved. So looking at your childhood when you were just born, how was religion growing up? How did it evolve? What was it like inside of your early childhood years?
So my faith was pretty much essential to who I was as a person, to my household as a unit, and really the connection that I had to my family as a whole. So as I mentioned in a previous episode, I come from a very religious background and family. My great-grandfather had 9 children, all of which are a preacher or a minister to some capacity in the church. And that didn't stop at my family. My granddad was a deacon at a church, and then the man that my mom married, stepdad, was also a preacher, and he did so all around the country. So it was, even as a young person, essential to who I was. It was essentially who I made myself out to be, a Christian, and I say that unapologetic.
How come you're not you mentioned before, and if people at home watching this don't know, make sure you go back and watch JD's first and second episodes. But you mentioned before that you work in corporate America. Why corporate America and not follow in the footsteps of your family? Do something with the church, become a preacher, a usher, something.
That's a good question, Manny. And in fact, I was some of those things. Definitely remember being on the usher, passing out the tithing envelope, or catching people as they fell in prayer, or leading worship in church, being on the praise team, being a security some Sundays, whatever the church needed at the time. Of course, I was available, and that's what I was part of growing up. So as much as we were in school as kids, I was in church. But why I didn't pick that as a career path is because I didn't think it was necessarily a choice that I had to make. A lot of people will say, well, you kind of have to do the church thing, or you have to try to do the corporate America thing. And I said, well, that's not the reality of who I am. If I am going into corporate America, I don't leave my values and my beliefs at the door. I mean, they kind of, in many ways, inform me of how to act integrally, how to act morally in a corporate setting. So I don't necessarily think that at the same time, even in a faith or religious background, there's still some components of business that are there. 501c3s are different tools that people use for tax purposes, and even the way that they handle finance, it would be likened to any corporation. So I feel like in both worlds, you can take something away, and in both worlds, you can give something. So I don't necessarily feel like that's something I had to choose. And so in my pursuit of climbing the corporate ladder, if you will, I made sure to bring those, fundamental beliefs with me.
Looking at the fact that you were inside of the world of religion and inside the church world growing up, we also talked, especially inside of the last episode, about loss and how that angered you to where you lost faith and belief, and how that kind of distanced you from the church. What are the things that brought you back, or did it bring you back?
I would say I kind of had to revisit my first love to get an understanding as to why I fell in love with the faith that I had in the first place. Was it a bunch of rules that I fell in love with? Was it a bunch of pages in ink that I fell in love with? Or did I have a relationship with something beyond the book? Did I have a relationship with the author? So it's something that I really had to revisit and really get back to those things like prayer that helped me through a lot of difficult transitory times in my life. Those things of like even fasting, getting away from, all of the minutia of life, all of the excess that's available even to us as Americans. And just really get to a place of solace and quiet, and really just kind of dig back into what it is that I got into, which was the ability to give to other people. So many times I remember working in kitchens, give away to those people who were less fortunate. I remember, giving clothes and things away for people during holiday season, and just regular weekends for people that needed it throughout the week. So being in that position is really what reminded me as to why I was a part of the faith in the first place, and it had allowed me to continue to be in that today.
Okay, so here in the story of Bowie Films, we like to stir the pot. And we've talked a little bit about you being a black man growing up in Detroit, right? And you being an educated black man growing up in Detroit. And you just briefly mentioned not too long ago some of the values that sort of your faith brought to corporate America to help you, right, stay on the right path of honesty and all these good things. As a black man in corporate America, it's tough to make it, right? Let's be honest. Now, you being an unapologetically and openly Christian and devoted Christian, right, in corporate America, has that played a sort of downfall the same way that being a black man would?
In some rooms, you can get some opposition, especially because like a lot of people don't think like you. And that's honestly the beauty of it. I mean, if I go in a corporate room, you could very well be Muslim. The person that could sit across from me could very well have a Buddhist background and beliefs and follow the Four Noble Path, So it's like you have to kind of gauge and like be aware of what you're here to do. If I'm here to give you some numbers to help you close on a deal, I'm not necessarily here to evangelize. If I'm in a board meeting and I'm kind of leading a charge on how to get some steps on how to close the processes or get some efficiencies going, that's not necessarily the moment to preach Jesus. I mean, kind of knowing where you are in a room is what's going to allow you to be effective. So if there is a time, which I mean, many times you do, because I mean, it's not all just business and office setting. A lot of the time, people are going through real stuff. People are going through losses at their homes. People are going through divorces at their homes. People are going through, a sick kid or something like that. And they share it. If you want to take that opportunity to, share what gets you through those hard times, you can. But at the same time, it's like I'm paid to do a job, or I pay you to do a job. I want to make sure that we're, not wasting company resources.
How are you able to keep that professionalism? How are you able to sort of distinguish between the two? I mean, it can't just be all about money, is it?
No, not at all. Like I was saying, it's not all just about dollars and cents. I mean, there's times that I can go to lunch, or if I see you in the hall, I can pull you to the side and say, hey, what's going on? And, and that's our time to talk and to connect. Or if you reach out to me, or if you want to pull me to the side, you can, or reach out to me after hours, you can. But I always stay open and available at the same time. Like I said, here to do a job.
I think that there are certain things, not so many, there are certain things that are touchy subjects in our world. I won't even say the United States, just in our world, in our society in general. One, being racist or race. That's just a touchy subject to talk about. Politics, a touchy subject to talk about. Religion, touchy subject to talk about. Sexual orientation has become a touchy subject in society to talk about. I think that you're already going through two of those. We talked about being black in America and how race has played an effect. And just looking at religion, there's so many different kinds of religions and how there could be possible drawback. So just like racism, was there any drawback from being of the certain religion that you are associated with, or anything inside of the church at all? Was there any kind of negative drawbacks?
Kind of in line with what Manny was asking. I don't necessarily think there was like a drawback. Like I said, you kind of had to read the room, and you have great opportunities to either share your faith with people. I mean, Detroit is a very, very, believe it or not, a lot of the black people that are, from here are definitely religious, or I don't care if they've not been to church in the last 10 years, they will tell you they have a church to go to. And to be honest, it's true.
But I ask because certain religions have certain beliefs and certain things that they go to. So whether that's, just to be of that, growing up outside the church, going through life inside of that lifestyle, whatever lifestyle, and I don't know if there was any hardcore things that you had to adhere to under that religion, but what I'm asking is, was there drawback from having that kind of, to being a part of that religion, no different than having drawback from being a black man?
Thanks for clarifying. Yeah, there was definitely a lot of ordinances or rules that were in place that I didn't necessarily care for, but I comported to. You don't necessarily miss them growing up as a kid because you've grown with them, But I mean, at the same time, growing up, it's like, a little bit later. That the music that I listened to, it was nowhere near eclectic as I am right now. Strictly gospel household, so that's all you heard blasting and railing. Later, I mean, I got into different types of music. So that was one of those things that I would think is a drawback, your exposure to what's really out there. So music was a type of thing because of my religious background. Types of places where I could go. I wasn't necessarily able to go to concerts. I wasn't going to any Beyonce concerts or Eminem while they were here, unfortunately. But it's more so like you want to associate with the people that are in your association, I guess. So, and to that degree, I felt like there was an incumbent or a hindrance with what I could, have been exposed to.
So just to add to that, and I know that you probably have a question, Manny, but it's just funny that you say this, JD, in regards to music. Now, you named some cross streets in terms of where you grew up that I wouldn't go to unless I had friends and protection. So,
And you don't got no friends, Michael.
We're going to ignore it. So, just to say, if you go to that neighborhood and, did you grow up listening to rap? And it's because rap has a lot of swear words, a lot of innuendos, a lot of things. Did music impact you or change you, or were you strictly gospel growing up, coming from someone in that neighborhood? I can't even imagine you going down the street playing some Kirk Franklin, So did you get drawn back inside the music, and did the music have an impact on you?
So I think the music definitely had the impact. It was no swearing, nothing like that in my household permitted, period. So my parents didn't even swear. They didn't swear at me. So that definitely has an impact on you as a kid. I mean, and certain types of music, I don't think should be, exposed to certain people in certain age groups. I mean, there was a whole fiasco or scam where Cardi B didn't let her kids listen to music because she didn't feel like it was appropriate at her age. And so I feel like to a more extreme degree, my parents felt that same way, but it was only gospel in my house. And believe it or not, if you drive down some streets in Detroit on Sundays, that's all you would hear in some of the cars that you're passing. It's just bumping Kirk Franklin, bumping Jacqueline Carr, and all these other Tasha Cobbs, all these other powerhouses that are out there.
So I want to go back not go back, but sort of go back to what Michael was asking, but maybe move a little forward with it because, and again, I hate to keep mentioning this because it should come as no surprise, but you are very well spoken, you are educated, and you've been educated from a young age. You've told us, right, that Pops made you stay in the books. So you're educated, you're obviously successful now, and you obviously got a higher degree, right, of education. You went to college, you went to the university. How do you maintain your faith, not just with having to deal with the kinds of different music, but the different kinds of education that you've received? You went to 3 high schools, right? You have a degree, you are in corporate America. This is all what you would say very opposite, right, of what the faith sort of teaches you. So how do you maintain your faith while maintaining that degree of education, that level of education that you've been had?
Well, I do want to set the record straight. I don't have my degree just yet. Still working on it, Mom. I promise we're going to get that degree. But, kid had to make some money first. But so going from, I think as a kid, you're kind of taught faith as like, almost as like stories that you kind of go through and you're just like, okay, this is this character, or this has this monolith. This is the story that I'm trying to, or this is the lesson that I'm trying to ascertain out of this parable, out of this story. When you get a little bit older, you kind of approach it from an academic standpoint, which I was a little bit more grateful. You have what's called an apologist, or someone who academically defends the faith in a room full of people. And that could be either historians, as recent as microbiologists, evolutionary biologists, like Dawkins, and people from around the world who are seriously interested in the big questions: what happens after death? Where did life start? The creation of the universe. All of this is what think that are kids' questions, are questions that many scientists around the world, many physicists around the world simply have. I mean, and as you grow older, you have the ability to have access to more information. So I kind of went from approaching my Christian faith from a serial story, monolith paradigm to I can now check historical fact and record to see what's supported and to see what is not. There are literal archaeological digs, insights around the world that support biblical places, times, and things that we read about. And so the fact that you now have the ability to go to these places are things that encourage my faith. And then 2, let me know that not only is it something that I could study, but places that I could go and things that I could experience for myself. So it allowed me to be a little bit more academic in my approach to faith, and to know that it's not something that's made up, but something that can be historically defended.
So throughout your education, you found yourself just building your faith, never questioning it or reducing it.
No, questioning it all the time. If it's real, because I went to school initially for medicine, pediatric cardiology. If you can't measure it, if you can't test it, if you can't question it, then how can you say if something is real or not? And so from that, I would say interrogation, or from being in a classroom where you had to defend everything that you stated, I feel like that kind of helped in that regard, because you're not going to stand up in an auditorium or a room full of like 300 of your peers and go off the cuff with them. You have to defend it. You have to prove what you said. And taking philosophy courses and business ethics, you kind of have to defend a lot of why you believe what you believe. And I think in that defense, you kind of grow.
So I just want to, I know that it's a touchy subject to talk on, but I just was curious what your relationship was with your father, who was a pastor. What kinds of things did he distill in you? Because we are all people that are always growing and learning. So what was your relationship with him growing up in the final years of while he was alive, and what was the impact that he had from a religious standpoint on you?
The final years were tough, to be transparent. There was a rocky point that we hit. Lord, I don't know how much I want to expose, but there was a point where I couldn't stay in the house anymore. I had to, make other means, because it just wouldn't be able to click. So it wasn't necessarily any love lost throughout that. I mean, at the time, you're kind of hot-headed, but still, it was like, I understand what you mean. We definitely both need a little bit more space for us to both grow in our respective places. So the final years they were initially apart, but then I found out that Pops was declining in health. So I made sure that I went to go visit it in the hospital, spend a little bit, as much time as I could during those final times. So like I wasn't trying to paint any like sunshine story to say that it was all uphill. We definitely had some mountains, some peaks, and some valleys that we had to kind of transverse throughout our relationship. So it was definitely rocky. At the same time, I've kind of grown and learned to respect him for everything that he did, everything that he initiated, and everything that he lived out. I can say that he lived what he preached.
So I have one more subject sort of to touch on before I give it to Michael, and that is what there's a big, how would you say, controversy or topic. There's always this discussion, right? That it's either creation versus evolution, right? And you are an intelligent man who obviously believes in his faith, but like Michael always says, we all have our stories, and we aren't the only ones going through these rough patches or experiencing these rough things. What would you say to somebody who, grows up on the same mentality, the same faith as you, but finds himself questioning the faith because of what has been taught to him through his formal education? What would you recommend? How would you go about sort of, making sure that their faith is concrete and not movable?
I would first encourage them to continue to ask questions. To ask questions is not necessarily to say that you disbelieve. You just necessarily need a little bit more proof. I would challenge the types of proof that you want or that you need, and encourage a little bit of reading. One of the books that I think was life-changing for me, Dr. John Lennox. He's a math professor or emeritus right now at Oxford University. He wrote the book Can Science Bury God? Or something along that fact. I would recommend reading that because he, as a mathematician, as a scientist himself, talks about the truth of God and talks about different types of proof, giving really, really good examples about purpose and how it kind of lines up with creation, with function. So again, I would just say, hey, those questions are definitely valid. There are other people out there with the exact same questions. And believe it or not, there are many places where you can go where there are answers to follow some of those questions. So keep asking, keep seeking, and I promise you, what's the old adage? When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I think that was Rafiki.
Well, I just want to end on this note because you, like Manny says, you are an intelligent black man who has gone through a lot. We all have our stories. We all have the moment where we want to reach the top of the mountain, but we have to overcome a lot of humps along the way. I know that you're going through one of those humps. You've gone through many humps to get to that mountaintop, and we all will get there individually and or together. But that's what makes us different, and that's what gives us all the story that we have to share. And I just want to kind of circle back to the whole discrimination piece to kind of bring this all together, as I feel like this episode is about religion. To kind of ask you what your thoughts are or what your advice is to other individuals that have been discriminated against, whether for being black, for being a black man, for being a black man that has faith in religion. Because nowadays, especially, it's not even just what religion you belong to, but it's not something that's popularized more so than let's be a gangster, let's do this, whatever is on TV. So what is that advice to you for somebody that has gone through so many obstacles, so many humps while trying to reach that mountaintop, for anybody else that's going through that?
Like you said, Michael, there are a lot of ups and downs, ebbs and flows in life. It's your responsibility, I think, speaking specifically to my community, to take those experiences and to share them with other people, create spaces, create platforms where you could leverage and take advantage of those experiences and monetize them. You didn't go through what you went for yourself. You didn't go through what you went through for nothing. I mean, you have that experience now. So you can either take that and choose to say, woe is me, or you can choose to be involved in the community that you hold so dear. You can choose to be involved in the policies and the practices that you see passed by politicians. You can choose to be involved. You can either choose to, like I said, put your hands back, or you can get aggressive with the change that you want to see. And I think that that's exactly what this platform is doing. That's exactly what Bowie Films is pushing and promulgating. So if people aren't involved, are not connected, then you're already losing. So get connected, start having conversations with people who are effective, and start making change.
Awesome. Well, it's a pleasure having you. I know that next episode, like I said, we only got 2 left, and the next one is that slobber knocker, that climax of everything that's going on in your life, and we've learned so much along the way. And I talk about, you know, all the humps and that we go over in order to reach the mountaintop. Manny, for you, it's more like ant hills. But, you know, it's neither here nor there. You know, we all have to go over something. Yours are just a little bit smaller than the ones that we go over. No big deal, Manny. But I want to thank you, JD, for being here. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your dedication. Thank you for sharing your story. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to Bowie Films on the channel and checking us out here on Story Of. There are other shows you guys can check out, but Story Of is definitely massively blowing up. And if you want to be a guest on here, you can hit us up. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit us up inside of the comments and let us know if you want to be a guest. And as always, thank you for tuning in, and we will check you guys out next week.